You are listening to the Two and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
It's Travis Currah and Sheldon Jones. The Two and Out CFL podcast as things are heated up. Division final weekend in the CFL is on the way. We have a new president of the United States, and we did learn that Sheldon Jones will not be a city commissioner in Palmetto, Florida. We look forward to 2028. Sheldon Jones losing to Scott Whitaker, who ended up achieving 59% of the vote. Best of luck next time, Sheldon Jones. That's democracy.
Yeah, it was a good fought battle. Just want to thank my opponent for a fair race, and I'm just going to support him in this peaceful transition of power.
Do you have politics in your future? I think that was pretty good, man.
No, I'd be canceled like the day after I due to old tweets. So
I'm too soft. I am far too soft.
To have that SAWFT?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To have a Twitter account, my feelings would be hurt in 5 minutes flat, and I would be out. I fully admit that.
If I can take the mean tweets from the Two and Out faithful, I think I could handle it.
Yeah, they're hardening you up. They're hardening you up. We want to send our condolences to the late, great Charlie Turner, who has passed away at 79 years old. He was a member of the Hamilton Tiger Cats, Edmonton Eskimos, and Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He won Grey Cups in 67, 75, and 78. A 5-time West Division All-Star, 3-time CFL All-Star, and he was the league's most outstanding offensive lineman in 1975. One of those great names in CFL history. Gone at 79 years old, so passing along our condolences there. Sheldon, I wanted to start the show off this week as well by giving a big shout out to USports playoffs happening this weekend. And you want to talk about rivalries, man. Montreal and Laval playing in the Dunsmore Cup. We have Western and Laurier in the Yates Cup, St. Mary's and Bishops in the AUS Final. And this was actually kind of a buzz at Mosaic Stadium last week when the Lions were playing the Riders. The U of R versus the U of S in the Hardy Cup. That is going to be a hard-hitting affair. That one's up in Saskatchewan at Griffith Stadium, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a big rivalry like that for the Hardy Cup. That's awesome, and it's interesting with the Riders being in the West Final and the Rams and the Huskies. So football is alive and well in Saskatchewan this late into the playoffs. Yeah,
those are going to be some games to watch. I don't know if the USports playoffs are on TV, but I'm gonna have to find a way to watch those games. It's a busy weekend of Canadian football coming up. Now, Sheldon, how cool of a story is this? Canada West unveiling its All-Stars for the year. The Manitoba Bisons leading the way with 9 selections. Now, if I'm correct, it was the Rams that beat the Bisons and the Huskies that beat the Thunderbirds, right? But Maya Turner, the first female athlete ever to be named an All-Star at USports football after making 14 of 18 field goal attempts with a long of 48. She made all of her converts. Man, this is an awesome story.
Oh yeah, it's incredible. She did a great job, and it's really cool that she's been recognized for that.
And yeah, there's going to be lots to watch this weekend and lots to watch going into the offseason. I know Jonathan Senecal, he's from Montreal, I believe. And we have the Canadian quarterbacks we've been watching with Nathan Rourke and Trey Ford. Well, he could be drafted coming into next year, and we'll see if that is going to add another Canadian quarterback to the Canadian Football League. Something to look forward to here. Montreal Carabin, and he's looking for his second straight Vanier Cup. But we got some division finals in the CFL talk about fired up. Montreal, sold out. Winnipeg, sold out. Ratings last weekend were up 41% over last year. You have to think that a Montreal-Toronto and a Saskatchewan-Winnipeg division finals is a recipe for good business in the CFL, man.
Oh yeah, these are the best of the best so far in the league this year, and the fact that they're rivals, especially with Toronto Montreal having a rematch of last year, and just Saskatchewan Winnipeg being probably the best rivalry in the league. So very exciting games for fans this weekend.
Not quite, complete opposite situations, but last year at this time, the Toronto Argonauts are 16-2. They've got, going into Grey Cup week, all the hardware, with MOP and all the great awards and things like that. And the Montreal Alouettes are coming into BMO last year with nothing to lose. Well, now everybody knows what the Alouettes are. Their hot start to the season. The Argos are going to Montreal after starting off the season slow. Chad Kelly suspended for 9 games. But now the Alouettes are kinda they're not dominating their way into this position, while the Argos are maybe the hottest team left. The Riders won 5 in a row to end, the Calgary game. Winnipeg winning 4 of their last 5. Toronto on fire. Montreal, not so much. So these two teams played each other 3 times during the regular season. Toronto taking 2 of the meetings, but the Alouettes here, 2.5-point favorites. The over-under set at 52.5. So they come into the game as slight favorites. Now, I just look at the running backs here. And you know what? Last week against Ottawa, that was not Toronto's game plan. They were down 10 a couple times early in that game, and all of a sudden the big play was working. Everything over top. They're scoring long touchdowns left and right. But the Argos have run all over the Alouettes this year. In his past 2 games against the Als, Kadeem Carey has 250 combined yards. And in fact, in week 17, the Argos ran for 234 yards against the Alouettes. If they're going to be running wild like that over the Alouettes, it's going to be a tough one for the home team to advance to their second straight Grey Cup.
Yeah, and that with just the amount of yards they haven't given up, Nothorpe's going to be keying in on that this week in his game plan, which could be an interesting thing for the Argos to maybe try to go away from that, to try to surprise them after they had so much success. That's the best part of a playoffs is these coaches are trying to outcoach each other, and what happened during the regular season might not actually be indicative of what's going to happen in the playoffs.
It's the most fascinating thing, I think, about the CFL. Sometimes it looks like, what are you guys doing during the regular season? And it's like it's all come down to these games. This is what they've been prepping for all season long, and all of a sudden the plays are crisp and the decisions are right, and it all comes together in the playoffs. And those Alouettes, they've kind of struggled stopping the run this year. They've given up almost 2,100 yards, the 7th, worst rushing defense in the Canadian Football League. But there are some players on the Alouettes that had success against the Argos this year, and that's Cole Speaker. He's been Montreal's leading receiver against the Argos in all 3 games, and games where Cody Fajardo was still in there. 11 for 12, 212 yards and 2 touchdowns with Cody throwing him the ball. He's really had a good season. He seems to have Toronto's number, and with Tyson Philpott now missing, I know he's been out for much of the season, of course, but Speaker has become a reliable target, of course, for that Alouette offense.
Yeah, and with how good he's played, that might actually open some things up for Austin Mack too, who's kind of getting back into the swing of things. And if Toronto's going to key on Speaker just for the amount of yards and performance that he's had against them, then that could leave Austin Mack, with some openings.
And now both teams, of course, have a lot of talent on defense. You just look at the linebacking core, I guess on both teams, but the Alouettes have Sankey, Beverette, and hey, even the Canadian Canton Arku, who has been making plays this year. And of course, Winton McManus on the double blue side of things. So those guys can definitely make plays, but I find actually both teams are susceptible to the deep ball. The Alouettes have had the most throughout the season, and the Argos have given up the most throughout the season. But we know Toronto's big play ability as well. It almost feels like that this game could come down to who hits those deep balls. Like, is somebody going to go 4 of 5, or is somebody going to go 1 for 6 kind of thing? That could be the difference here in this one.
Yeah, but the interesting looking at the stats is, yes, Montreal's given up a lot of passing yards and a lot of rushing yards, but they've only given up the second most amount of points. So they've been doing a really big bend but don't break kind of defense. And the unfortunate thing for them is when Toronto hits their shots, they're usually scoring the touchdowns when they hit those big plays. So that's gonna be a very interesting dynamic between just how much Montreal is going to let them stay in front of them instead of trying to go over top of them. But that's going to be one of the biggest keys that I'm looking at.
It's been really interesting throughout the season watching Walter Fletcher for the Alouettes, where many times hasn't been, I guess, the most consistent threat on the ground, but he leads the CFL in yak in 2024. 626 yards after the catch on the season, almost 140 yards ahead of the next closest receiver, and that is actually Stephen Dunbar Jr. of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So, and we've seen Fletcher break big 50-yarders this year. So the Argos are going to need to be on top of that. But the number one key for the Alouette offense is it feels almost impossible to keep the Argo defensive line out of your backfield and keeping Cody Fajardo clean, because it might be a challenge for those deep plays to develop with that Argo defensive line breathing down your neck.
Oh, yeah. Cody's going to have time if he's going to be able to get those deep balls. But he's also not going to be afraid to just tuck the ball and run if he needs to. But that's a huge matchup between Montreal's O-line and Toronto's D-line.
Mackay Polk of the Toronto Argonauts, they're a big receiving threat, even though DeVaris Daniels had 2 touchdowns a week ago against Ottawa. Polk has 384 yards in his last 3 games. I think Sheldon would agree. Maybe he got robbed, I think, out of that Eastern nominee for most outstanding rookie, although we do acknowledge that Shamar Bridges was definitely on a record-setting pace before he ended up getting hurt. It might be tough, I think, for the Alouettes to bring pressure to Chad Kelly. Now, Kelly did a good job of not being rattled last week, and I think we've seen it where he could get hit and turn the ball over. Do we need to point to the Eastern Final last year when the Argos drove down the field, Marc-Antoine Dequoy picked him off on the goal line, went 110 yards the other way, and the Alouettes were off to the races. Now, we've seen the Alouettes bring pressure from all over the place, including Tyrese Beverette. This guy leads the league in defensive plays. He is an absolute monster in so many ways. But being without Mustafa Johnson, I think in the middle of that D-line, a late injury on the year could be a tough loss for that Alouette defense. This guy can disrupt plays, and it'll be interesting to see how those Alouettes adjust without him.
It will be. Nolthorpe is just crazy with when he comes to his schemes and stuff. So I'm sure they're going to try to find a way to disguise or even just kind of try to make up for that loss there. But that's one of the things that made it so hard on Chad Kelly last year in these finals, just Nolthorpe's trying to confuse him. But for Chad Kelly this year, he has that film, so he can see what happened and why maybe he wasn't looking at the proper areas. And for Argo fans, they're going to hope that he's able to correct that this season or this game.
The Alouettes have been 6-3 at Percival Molson in 2024, while the Argos were the opposite, 3-6 away from the friendly confines of BMO Field this season. I look at those rushing yards for the Argos. They're near the top of the league, while the Alouettes are near the bottom. That time of possession for the Argos near the top of the league, while the Alouettes are near the bottom. Some of these things really surprise me when I look at the entirety of a season. But that turnover ratio, the Alouettes, second best in the league, distant second behind the Saskatchewan Roughriders, but they're plus 10 in that department. They've done pretty good at protecting the ball there. But I'll also watch special teams here. We know that Janarian Grant and James Letcher Jr. can break a play on any given return. So it'll be interesting to see how those kickers and those special teams coordinators are going to try to make those guys non-factors.
Oh, for sure. Special teams, ball position, it's one of the most important things in the game. Just giving your team the opportunity to have less yards in front of them with a big return. Three keys definitely is the special teams, red zone percentage for both teams, and then turnover. Whoever's going to win the turnover battle, I think, is going to win this game.
And now the CTV audience will be exposed to the relentless horns at Percival Molson.
They sure will.
Is it going to be a controversial topic on X on Saturday?
It will be on the first offensive or the first defensive play that the Montreal is out there. Yes.
It'll be. We'll see how Jason Moss has his team fired up. Coming out of the bye week, and I know they tried to go with the whole thing. Every game's a meaningful game. There are no games that mean nothing. But we're gonna find out if what the Alouettes have done over the second half or the third of the season was just them, enjoying their cushion they had in the East Final, or if they just started off a little hot and just cooled off the rest of the way.
Yeah, well, let's not forget that they, outside of a giant gust of wind, held their own against a team that was trying their best to win a game, even when they didn't have all their starters there in the second half. So I think that's definitely something that they can build on going into the playoffs. It's just that they were able to show that, they were kind of on an uptrend. I know it's still a loss, but I don't think the loss is the thing that's important there. I think that just the fact that they were able to execute and keep a strong team at bay just in their final game of the season should help them going into this.
Now we go to Princess Auto Stadium, the stadium where the Western Final has resided for 3 straight seasons. The Winnipeg Bombers, winners of 3 straight West Finals, and they have a 3-1 record at that stadium in the playoffs. Their last loss came to Edmonton in 2017 in the West semifinal. Now, the Riders and the Bombers. The Bombers are 3.5-point favorites here. A little bit of a lower over-under, 47.5, and I think we could both see this game being a 20-19 grinding out affair, although both teams obviously have the ability to score points. The Bombers 7-3 inside their division, while the Riders are 5-5 inside that division, and the Bombers have won 2 of 3 matchups this year, including the Banjo Bowl and the Labor Day Classic. Trevor Harris, his last loss actually came week 14 against Winnipeg, where Tyrell Ford picked him off twice that day. I think the Riders are going to be having to keep an eye on Tyrell Ford in the West Final.
Oh, for sure. He's going to obviously be one of the guys they're going to try to stay away from, but just depending on who he's lined up against, if he's going to be matched up against one of the two receivers that, Trevor Harris goes to the most, which is Keyshawn Johnson and Sam Emulus, then he's going to have his fair share of chances to, knock the ball away or get an interception.
Yeah, if we noticed last week, it did look like Gary Peters was working against Keyshawn Johnson for most of the game. We'll see where they're going to put Ford in this one. Sam Emilus has been probably Harris's favorite target over the last few weeks, at least the hottest receiver for the Riders over the last few weeks. But what has surprised me, and we know how good that the Rider rush defense has been this year, but it's the fact that Brady Oliveira hasn't had over 50 rushing yards against the Riders in 3 games this year. He has had about 150 receiving yards in those 3 games, so he still obviously is a threat from the backfield for the Bombers. But man, I feel like it has to be a focus for the Bombers to be able to run on the Riders, or are they just going to lean into it and try to hit Kenny the King and Dembski and Wilson and that kind of thing? But they're going to want to get Brady rolling, I think, early in the West Final.
Oh, for sure. Brady is going to be their pulse. He's going to be the steady flow that they have there. It's that, and then the open middle of the field, which always seems to get taken out by the opposing players like Dembski, like Kenny the King Lawler. It's going to be interesting just to see what kind of different looks that Coach Corey Mace has back there, because even against BC, there was a couple that went straight at the middle that weren't crazy deep throws, but especially that first one that had. Was it Katoy?
Katoy that had the big touchdown.
On that first drive there. So, they need to shore up that middle, because that is where Dembski has been a Rider killer, most of his career since he left the Riders to go back home to Winnipeg.
What is it about the middle of the field? I think it was the Labor Day game where Winnipeg just cleaned him up all game long.
Yeah. It just seems that he has a deep 2-man zone, and for whatever it is, when the opposing quarterbacks have time, they're able to exploit that with crossing routes, and I don't know. I hope there's a new look. We saw last week against BC that they really didn't pressure Vernon Adams that much. They had a guy spying him. Now Zach's not the same kind of quarterback as Vernon Adams, so maybe they will put more pressure because they won't have to worry about him, running too much. I know he's still mobile enough. He'll go get first downs if needed, but also when Zach is flushed out of the pocket and the receivers, know and recognize and get to open spaces, that's when he's most dangerous. So they really have to find a way to keep Zach in the pocket, force pressure on him, and get him rattled, because he's another quarterback that when he does get rattled, he gets rattled.
And that's what happened with last week. The Rider defensive backs did a great job of staying on their receiver once Vernon Adams was running around out there. It always seems like Winnipeg, even if they're on second and long, Zach can, get out of the pocket and create some magic with his receivers. Now, I'll admit, it seemed like most of those plays were with Dalton Schoen, who had a season-ending injury and is not in this game. Like, those guys just seem to have this great chemistry on plays like that. So the Rider DBs, as long as they don't let the plays get away from them, maybe they can still create that magic for them when Zach gets out of the pocket. But the Riders are going to have I think another big game from AJ Ouellette. He had a great performance last week against the BC Lions, including two rushing touchdowns. One was, from the one, and one was that 30-yard rushing touchdown that he just blew up through the line. And AJ Ouellette, I think he told Trevor Harris, I get paid to run the ball in October and November, not in June and July. So we'll see how fresh he is coming into this game, because the Bombers, they can be susceptible against the run. They're 6th in the league in that department, giving up well over 100 yards a game. But the Riders experiencing a little bit of injury issues there. But last week they had a veteran as the 6th offensive lineman. Correct me if I'm wrong, is Peter Godber. So it'll be tough for them without Trevor Reid, but they did have some depth there to bring into this next man up mentality for Saskatchewan.
Yeah, but Reid also hasn't been ruled out yet by Corey Mace. He said that he thinks that Reid's going to try to tough it out, but they'll have to wait to see another couple days worth of treatment and practice. But yeah, ironically, the O-line has become one of the strongest points of the team, and they've had the most injuries and the most, haven't had the most complete lines. It's always been changing. Logan Ferland's been playing every single position and playing it well. So, depending on whether or not Trevor Reid is able to go, I'm not sure that's a huge deal, just with how well the offensive line is played. And I think Mark Mueller showed some different wrinkles with this game this last week against BC, so I assume there will be some new stuff in there too. They didn't really feature Rock Armstead that much. Maybe this week it might change, where they can get him involved a little bit more, but it's a tough choice when you're going to take away rushes and passing yards from Ouellette to give to Armstead. But I think that balance there and just the different types of backs they are could confuse Winnipeg.
And if you look at the practice reports for the teams, I know some members of Rider Nation pretty nervous. Brian Cox Jr. didn't practice on Tuesday. He was back on Wednesday. Kean Schaefer-Baker also didn't practice on Tuesday. He was back on Wednesday. CJ Rivas missed Tuesday, returning on Wednesday. And Trevor Reid hasn't practiced either of the practice days so far this week. If we do look at the Bombers, though, talk about getting healthy at the right time. It does look like veteran safety Brandon Alexander has returned to practice in full this week, and also linebacker Kyrie Wilson returning to practice in full this week. Man, the Bombers coming into the West Final as, I guess, relatively healthy as they are. I know there's no Schoen, I know there's no Big Hill, but getting some pieces back on that defense, I'm sure they're going to appreciate that for an intense Western Final.
Oh, for sure. They just have to be worried about, if they can get back up to game speed as quick as they can with them being out for a little bit. But, they're professionals and it's playoffs and it's, bonus money time for them. So, they're going to play a little harder because they still got one more week of bonus money they're trying to get.
Yeah, you always want to play more when there's more money on the line in this one. I think one of the big talking points is going to be the turnover ratio. Zach Collaros throwing 15 interceptions this year, the second most to the East nominee for MOP, Bo Levi Mitchell, who has thrown 18, but the Riders second in the CFL in interceptions this year, including interception leader Roland Milligan. So the Bombers haven't protected the ball as well as they have in the previous few years, but it goes without saying that the Riders need to capitalize on that. They can't be picking them off and leaving, threes on the field or going for long drives and ending them in field goals. We all know what Trevor Harris is capable of. There have been games we've seen in a semifinal or a playoff game where he'll throw, and I'm not really exaggerating, 15 completions in a row kind of thing. He does have the ability to go on a roll in Winnipeg here, and you have to think. And I know Collaros wants it. He is a competitor, but he's got the 2 rings. Trevor doesn't have a ring, man. He looks like he's coming into this game hungry. It feels like there is a slight balance that an athlete needs to work in their head, not to be too pumped up, too psyched out, to overthink every play. Do you think Trevor Harris has found that balance so far?
I think he has. I think he's actually just extremely confident, but he's being a little bit more reserved about it. I watched his interview yesterday that he had after practice, and he even admitted that he's extremely confident, but he's not willing to give any locker room material, bulletin board material. So he was pretty modest, but I think they've been pretty confident for a long time. I think this team has been built to be playing at this time of the year, and I think they expect that. They're coming up against the biggest target that they're the biggest opponent that they could have, and the most difficult opponent too. But I don't think when they played each other in the Labor Day Classic and the Banjo Bowl, it was best on best. There was a lot of injuries happening right there, and so I think both teams getting players back, but I think the Riders are getting more players back than they would have had at Labor Day and Banjo Bowl. So I think this is going to be a very, very close matchup here today, or on Saturday.
Now, Kenny the King Lawler has 100 yards in 3 of his last 4 games. We know he is going to be a problem for whoever is going to be covering him in the Saskatchewan secondary, but it will be can Collaros have the time to get him the ball? And we've seen Corey Mace's defense hasn't really been big on the pressure. You know what I mean? They haven't really, that hasn't been their philosophy. So, which I do think at times can be kind of ballsy to allow some of these quarterbacks to have time, but they've made it to this point, and it has worked out so far for them. And hey, they're great against the run. There is no denying that with the Roughriders. So the Bombers are going to have a test getting their run game going, their bread and butter going, because those Bombers have the top time of possession in the CFL, 31-45 a game. Like, they're way up there. They have the best pass defense in the CFL. They're first there. And when the season started and Jordan Younger took over, some thought that this was going to be a shaky defense in Winnipeg. No Jackson Jeffcoat. They have certainly adjusted as the season has gone on. The Bombers, the least points against on the season. And I think Sheldon, the Riders knew, and the Riders have known this for the past 5 years. If they want to get to the Grey Cup, they need to beat Winnipeg. And that's what makes this so perfect. The Bombers don't want to give up their spot, but the Riders know to get in their spot, they just need to beat the Bombers. Now, they have to do it in Winnipeg. Now, I think when the season began, I think Rider fans probably would have taken hosting the West semifinal, first-year head coach, all this sort of stuff. But then the roller coaster of the season gives you hope. Oh, we can host the West final. So then it kind of does become heartbreaking at the end of the year. But I think they knew, if we're going to go to the Grey Cup, you got to do it the hard way. And sometimes doing it the hard way, that prepares you for what's to come next week in Vancouver.
Yeah, like we kept saying at the beginning of the year when Winnipeg was struggling, they're still Winnipeg. They're going to figure this out. And it just took a little longer than I think anyone thought it was going to take to figure out. But I think the whole narrative of you have to go through Winnipeg. You haven't been able to get it done. You haven't beaten them in a playoff since 2017. Is that what you said? You need to.
That was the last time Winnipeg lost at home.
Okay. Sorry.
The last time Saskatchewan beat Winnipeg in the playoffs, I do not have. That might be the 2007 Grey Cup. I don't know.
Yeah. So, even, I think Bomber fans are going to be a little bit more confident than Rider fans, and so they should. They're first place, but they only won first by a half game. I'm certainly not confident that the Riders are going to win, but I'm also not confident that they're going to lose. And I do think that they're definitely going in there as an underdog, and they have nothing to lose, and they have everything to gain by them showing up, and if they can get this win in Winnipeg, that can exercise a certain demon that's held over their head at Princess Auto Stadium. And just the fact it's a significant game against Winnipeg. The Riders have not won a significant game outside of a couple Labor Day games for a very long time. First game in the New Mosaic, they lost. First playoff game in New Mosaic, they lost. So these significant losses against Winnipeg are piling up, and it's got to end sometime. So why not this year?
Do you know who the starting quarterback was for the Saskatchewan Roughriders the last time they beat Winnipeg in Winnipeg?
I don't know, so I'm going to guess. Centurion. Tom Burgess?
It is Zach Collaros.
Zach Collaros. Wow.
I don't know. Is it the Zach curse, man? Maybe we can call it was it the Simone curse? Is it Simone who hurt Zach? It all comes back to him. Number 21 in black and gold. Either way, man, I'm looking forward to a Saturday full of Canadian football.
Yeah, while we're talking about Riders, though, I got to shout out a big Rider fan, Marcia. She's up for hair salon of the year in Regina. So I sent out a tweet where anyone in Regina, or maybe even not in Regina, just pretend you live in Regina, you can vote for Marcia at YQR Hair Lounge.
Let's see your flow, because she's responsible for it.
She is. This is beautiful. Beautiful. She does well.
So no, if the Riders win this game, any plans to dye it?
AJ dyed his, so I don't have to dye it.
Okay.
No.
I was hoping to see that. The contrasting ginger mustache, beard, and the bleach blonde hair.
We're going to be in Vancouver. There's going to be alcohol involved. I'm not saying something couldn't happen, but
if there's
no
a
plans.
Shoppers Drug Mart, we might do a DIY dye job.
Oh boy. Oh yeah, I also want to give a shout out to Matt. Same thing, Prairie Dog. I sent a tweet out about it, but he ran the YQR Food Truck Wars. So two great Rider fans who definitely could use your support in with getting some votes here.
I love this. Supporting fans, or Two and Out Nation. They get some wins going on as well. So Sheldon, how you feeling, man? Are you nervous for the weekend?
You know what? I said when we finally got rid of Dickinson and we got Corey Mason there, my first expectation that I wanted was to make the playoffs. And not only did they make the playoffs, but they got a home playoff game, and they won that home playoff game. So obviously I'm not going to be happy if they lose, but I don't think I'm going to be as upset as I would be if the Riders were in the middle of, a few good seasons in a row and they're perennially in the West Final and losing that. So it's going to hurt, but I've already seen the progress that I was anticipating and more for the first season. So I'm going to be pretty satisfied with the season if they do fall short here on Saturday.
I know you're going to say no, but if the Bombers win this and they win the Grey Cup, 3 Grey Cups in 5 years, you're not going to say it's a dynasty, but I do think that some Bomber fans they're talking that already. But now, if they go to the Grey Cup, I've always thought a dynasty was 4 consecutive wins. That's what I kind of thought. Now,
yeah,
if they go to the Grey Cup and it's 5 in a row, but it's 3 losses in a row, is there such a thing as a Western dynasty? I don't know.
Well, is it like the Buffalo Bills then?
It is a special time in Bomber history. There's no doubt about that.
Oh yeah, I don't care if it's a dynasty. They've been the best team because each one of these Grey Cups they were favored, I believe. Maybe not the first one, but they shouldn't technically, according to everyone, they shouldn't have lost against Montreal and they shouldn't have lost against Toronto. So I know they did, but Bomber fans obviously have that to hang their hat on. They have been the best team for half a decade, pretty much. Just football is a lovely sport where any team can win on any given Sunday, and that happens. And it's going to happen this week. We have 4 extremely capable teams. Any one of these teams could win this week, and any one of these teams could win next week. What more can you ask for?
Yeah, exactly. What more can you ask for? And I think what makes the Bombers so impressive, it's just how they play as a team, man. Sometimes if the offense is struggling, the defense will pick it up, and then the special teams will come through in the clutch as well. That's what the Bombers are. They are a complete team, and beating them on their home turf is a tall mountain to climb. The only mountain in Manitoba is the Bombers at Princess Auto Stadium. All right, Sheldon, let's lock in those picks and get going and let the butterflies set in for the East and West Final for the right to play at the 111th Grey Cup at BC Place in Vancouver. I'm going to make it short and quick. I am taking the Argos and I am taking the Bombers. I think I know your pick, Sheldon, and one of us is going to be sad, or we're each going 1-1 or something.
Yeah, I short and sweet as well. I have Montreal and I have Saskatchewan.
I love it. Are you ready for another Montreal-Saskatchewan Grey Cup?
Hey, if the Riders can exercise the Bomber demon and then exercise the Montreal demon in the same season, I'm here for it.
Well, and Cody and Jason would want to exercise the Saskatchewan demon. That brings a lot of storylines.
I know. It would be, honestly, the storylines would be crazy. I know that yours is going to come true and I'm going to be miserable, but I have a grumpy Care Bear costume I can wear to Grey Cup if it turns out to be the Argos and the Bombers.
I really hope you wear that if that happens.
It's really warm. I don't know what to see. But I will be grumpy if that's the matchup that happens.
Grey Cup Thursday, you'll be grumpy, but by Friday, you'll forget about it all and just be ready for the Grey Cup. Stress-free, brother. Stress-free. It's all right.
I'm just cheering for the Jonas Brothers if that's the case.
You'll be like me at WrestleMania 40. I'm a sucker for you, baby.
At least you had one team to cheer for that night. I didn't. I wouldn't.
You can rate, review, and subscribe to Two and Out on your favorite podcatcher. Check us out on YouTube and go to the website as well. And it is twoandout.ca where you can find our Patreon account. And I hope you enjoy a Saturday doubleheader of great CFL playoff football. We'll talk to you after the games and before the 111th Grey Cup. I'm Travis Currah. He's Sheldon Jones. Take care of yourself.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.